the minority in our country, obviously being the white people, are feeding us.
Africa and South Africa, it belongs to the Bantu people. It belongs to the Ngunis. The land must go back to the chiefs. Land must be expropriated without compensation.
I'm a farmer. I've been doing that for 5 years commercially, and I operate on leased land for 5 years. So for me, this is a process that it might not fix everything, but it will get me into the playing field.
Yeah.
If there is today a blanket expropriation happening, they will still not give you the land. If the ANC was in any way serious about giving black people land, I have no problem. They should give black people land.
The government doesn't trust black people with land in this country. And that's evidenced by the millions of title deeds that are held in backlogs.
Hey guys, my name is Modi and you are welcome to Modi Speaks. So regarding the situation going on in South Africa, the fact that South African government have decided to forcefully seize farmlands belonging to white South African farmers. They introduced a new law that makes it legal to expropriate these lands without giving no single compensation to the white farmers, whom in most cases purchased these farmlands with their hard-earned money, because not all white farmers or white people in South Africa inherited lands from their parents. And by the way, these Afrikaners, the Boers, the white South Africans, were feeding the entire nation and even the sub-Saharan parts of Africa. But currently, out of greed and sheer ignorance and stupidity, the Cyril Ramaphosa-led government of South Africa have enacted laws that would allow him confiscate white South African farmers' lands without giving them a dime as compensation. This had led to an outbreak of vicious attacks on these South African farmers by black South Africans and calls from political party leaders encouraging their millions of followers to kill these white farmers and take their lands from them. Now, a good number of these farmers have been massacred, okay? My previous video shows some of the late victims of this silent genocide. I call it a silent genocide because the South African government is pretending like these killings are not happening, like the killing of Boers aren't happening. Mainstream media is also pretending like this death are not real, and a lot of people who are supposed to be speaking out about it are all covering up the story and pretending like nothing is going on. Now, I found myself wishing that I could just fly to South Africa right now so that I could just get the opportunity to interview random strangers, both white and black alike, and ask them one or two questions regarding this disastrous development. I mean, that seems like the best way to get honest and genuine feedback. And just as I was nurturing this wish, I stumbled upon this street interview that was conducted on these South Africans. It is not exactly what I was looking for though, because some of the participants of this street debate are leaders of political parties, so their opinions were heavily biased, okay? But it is better than nothing, okay? So we are going to listen to their views and hear what they have to say. I might be playing out the entire video before sharing my opinion, or I might be sharing my thoughts along the line as we go along with the video. Let's watch.
South Africa has a new law which basically gives the government the framework on how they can acquire private property from individuals, sometimes with no compensation. Obviously, that's got tongues wagging and hairs crossed. So what does it mean for South Africans, particularly young ones? So I want to start with some farmers. And Guguletu, we are on your farm right now. How did you receive the news, or what do you take of this new law?
There is a lot to discuss when it comes to this law. It is very touching for a lot of the youth. Because one, it opens a lot of opportunities and a lot of doors for a lot of us. But at the same time, there is a lot in terms of agriculture on how it really does affect, because the minority in our country, obviously being the white people, are feeding us on a day-to-day basis.
What do you mean when you say feeding us?
In terms of the number of farmers that there are, the white farmers are a very small group, yet the numbers that they're able to achieve in terms of production of food are feeding South Africa and even the sub-Sahara.
Okay, so let me speak to Tevi here, because you are the white farmer that is being discussed here, right? So for you, how do you take it? Because the government is trying to sell this as a kind of land reform act, and we'll get to the details shortly. But what's your take?
So the main thing to realize is, I believe that property rights and the guaranteed property rights in a country is part of the constitution. And in every country in this world where property rights has been taken from people, that country has started to become a third world country. Now, South Africa is definitely on its way to that, and I believe this could be the last nail in the coffin. So it's very important.
So let me come back to something you've said. You think South Africa is well on its way to becoming a third world country?
Yes, definitely. We can just look at a crime which affects us all. 27,000 murders a year. That is comparable to the third world countries in the world. South Africa is among the top 10 most dangerous countries in the world.
Okay, so coming back to the issue of this expropriation law, I just want to come to you, Bulelwa. How do you see the law?
I think it's important to first set out what the Expropriation Act is not. The Expropriation Act has nothing to do with land reform. Now, what this act introduces is that it's a balancing act between the interests of the public and the interests of the landowner.
Yeah.
So it makes provision for just and equitable compensation where they look at the history of the acquisition of the property, they look at the state investment, have there been any improvements? And what it does, which I think is what has gotten people in a frenzy, is that it introduces very few instances where expropriation can happen without compensation.
Okay, so before we talk about the compensation issue, Martin here is already shaking his head no. I'm curious to know what exactly you're disagreeing with. Can we agree, first of all, that expropriation has nothing to do with land reform?
This act is not a land reform law, and the difference is that successful countries, Germany, the United States, United Kingdom, Switzerland, South Korea, Japan, etc., all have a very wide degree of deference to owners when expropriating their property. The government says sorry to you by paying you market or above compensation. Now in South Africa, and this is what I was disagreeing about, is that it's not a small list of circumstances in which the government can now seize your property, confiscate your property without paying you a cent. So if you own fixed property anywhere in the country, a house, a business, a warehouse, a farm, and the government says, we think in the public interest we have to take this without paying you a cent, it is allowed to do that. That is inconsistent with the Constitution.
Okay, so I want to hear from Una here, because your view is actually quite different. Not only do you believe that expropriation needs to happen, you think it needs to happen across the board without compensation.
Exactly, that's correct. Because when you trace the history of South Africa, when you look at the situation of South Africa, my good sir was speaking about crime here. Crime is a result of poverty, and poverty was engineered in South Africa and Africa as a whole.
I'm sorry, guys, but I have to interject, okay? I didn't want to interrupt this debate, but I think I have to right now. He said, crime is a result of poverty. Now, that is just so incorrect. And looking at the topic we are discussing here, forceful seizure of land without compensation, and the fact that the white farmers in question are being racially targeted and unalived, then it is quite deceitful to just, say that crime is a result of poverty. Yes, poverty can lead to crime, but crimes are not generally committed because one is poor. Crimes are committed by horrible individuals, okay? A person commits crime because that person is simply not a morally upright individual. A person can be dirt poor, okay, but will never succumb to killing an innocent person or another person and stealing their resources from them. Whereas another person might be filthy rich, but still go on to commit hideous acts, okay? This guy by the name of Julius Malema is a prime example of what I'm talking about. Yeah, I know he is considered a hero in South Africa. I know the South African government thinks he's a great guy, but he is a horrible criminal who is openly calling for the massacre of white farmers and encouraging his millions of supporters to commit murder.
Alliance, shoot to kill, Yamaza. Kill the poor, the farmer. Kill the poor, the farmer. Brr, pa, pa, brr, pa, pa.
Now, if he were to be living in a saner country, okay, he will be in jail for his hate crime. And mind you, he is a very rich and powerful person. So that is what I'm saying. But let's continue.
What happened is that in 1652, when the settler arrived here, from that period up until the period of 1910, the land of our people was taken away on grounds that, no, this land is not used. The other one, they said, no, this land it's not being used for anything. So they actually expropriated it without compensation. And actually, when they expropriated it, they were using violence.
Why am I clashing with these guys so much? Anyway, I find it interesting how he started from 1652 when the settlers arrived, but didn't start from the early 1500s when his people arrived. Mind you, neither the Zulus, nor the Xhosas, nor the Sothos were the earliest settlers in South Africa. The real owners of South Africa were the San and the Khoi people. These were the very primitive people of South Africa. And when you join the names of these two groups of people, you get Koisan, okay? The San and Khoi. You join it to get the Koisan. So the Koisan people were the real owners, the indigenous people of South Africa. I consider them indigenous because no one knows where they came from, okay? They've been in South Africa for way too long, way before the Zulus, the Afrikaners, or whomever. Now, this guy conveniently omits the part where his people came into the land of Koisan people and took away their lands without compensation, okay? Without compensation. But he thinks it is the settlers who took his people's land without compensation. Now, I don't think it was wrong of the Zulu or the Xhosa people to have acquired lands back then. The same way I do not blame the Afrikaners for acquiring lands for themselves. What you have to understand is that back then, South Africa was newly discovered, okay? The Zulus were settling there. The Sothos were settling there. The Xhosas were settling there. The Afrikaners were settling there, okay? The land of South Africa was gradually forming its population. I mean, that is exactly how states, countries, continents were being formed. So if this guy believes that the Afrikaner settlers were not supposed to be there or that they were stealing their land, then he should also know that his people were also stealing the land from the Koisan people and that they are not supposed to be there too. Because the Afrikaners have white skin doesn't mean that they have less right to be there. And it doesn't make them less of a South African.
65 to 67% of the population of South Africa was allocated to only 7% of the land of South Africa.
Let me just bring our global audience into perspective here. The Native Lands Act is what basically was aligned with apartheid. Black and people of color could not own land. And so before we go on so deep into history, you've taken us back to the 17th century. Yes. In that case, shouldn't everybody leave the property to the Koisan, who are thought to be the native occupants of South Africa?
No, actually, Africa and South Africa, it belongs to the Bantu people. It belongs to the Ngunis. So it belongs to the people of Africa.
What about Tavy here?
We are not saying it doesn't belong here. Now that we are living together here, our perspective is that the land must go back to the chiefs, the traditional leaders and the state. We are unapologetic about this. Mm-hmm. Land must be expropriated without compensation, because this thing of wasting taxpayers' money, buying land that has been stolen.
Okay, we'll come to those details later. I just want to get your response real quick.
Oh my God. In case you don't know who the Koisan people are, this is an example of a Koisan. These are the Koisan people. This guy is clearly not a Koisan, okay? He is not. Now, I love the question that was thrown at him by the moderator, and she's a very talented and intelligent moderator, by the way. She did a good job, okay? She said, in that case, shouldn't everybody leave the land for the Koisan people, who are considered to be the indigenous people, indigenous inhabitants of South Africa? And my guy said, no, South Africa belongs to people of Africa. Now, the last time I checked, okay, Egypt is in Africa, and current Egyptians do not look anything like regular Africans. They look more like white people instead of Africans. These white-looking Egyptians were not always there. They migrated to Egypt at a point. Now, some people argue that Egyptians were formerly black people and had black pharaohs, the Nubians, etc. But today, these Egyptians are bona fide Africans. These white Egyptians are bona fide Africans. So this guy's logic is simply ridiculous, okay? It is just a clear case of rules for thee and not for me, because I look black and I migrated from somewhere and came to South Africa. That makes me more African than you, who looks white and migrated from somewhere to South Africa. It just doesn't make sense.
I believe the biggest problem in South Africa currently is the government. And if they expropriate the land in a blanket way, every portion of land, every hectare of land. Do you know how many hectares of land currently the government owns in South Africa? Lying bare and wasted. That was bought from white farmers. If the ANC was in any way serious about giving black people land, I have no problem. They should give black people land. They should get black people to farm on that land. And there's a lot of Bophuthatswana, for instance, is 4 million hectares that's lying bare. If they were really serious about empowering black farmers, they would have given them that farm. They would have given them title deeds. But if there is today a blanket expropriation happening, they will still not give you the land.
Now, I want to add something, okay? I hear a lot of people screaming that white farmers own 70% of the lands in South Africa. Now, that is so crazily ignorant, and it is very shameful that most of the people who say this are very mature individuals who are supposed to know better, okay? The real fact is that the South African government own 80% of the land in South Africa. And what the white farmers own, a greater percentage of, is just, privately owned fertile farmland. Arable farmlands, not just farmlands, but the privately owned fertile farmlands. The government still owns a greater percentage of the farmlands, both fertile and infertile, but a greater percentage of the privately owned fertile farmlands are owned by the Boers. So the true statement should go something like this. White farmers own 70% of the fertile farmlands that are privately owned in South Africa. Please know the difference between farmlands, fertile farmlands, and privately owned fertile farmlands. And also, the fertile farmlands in question were mostly made fertile by the white farmers themselves. Yes, some of their lands were naturally fertile already, but most of the farmlands were barren lands, okay, that these white farmers treated and nurtured to become heavily arable. And of course, I understand the need for these black South Africans to want more lands, seeing as they are the majority, but the problem is that their government, the South African government, despite having so much land lying around and going to waste, they don't really care about distributing the land to those who might need it, because if they did, they would have done so long before, because the South African government has a lot of farmland lying around wastefully, okay? So they're not really interested in doing that.
I'm hearing Bulelwa behind me here. Are you the one who was muttering?
Yes, he made a statement that there is a blanket expropriation. That is not the case in South Africa. In this new act of 2025, it's more difficult for government to prove that land is expropriated. There are about 7 or 8 stages that the government must prove. So my argument is that there should not be any fear-mongering around the Expropriation Act, because actually the landowners' rights are even more protected than ever before.
Let me hear from Martin, actually, because that's your interpretation. And Martin, you seem to think that the law is actually now contravening the Constitution.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Act says that when the government deems it in the public interest, there are examples, but generally in the public interest, the government may take property without paying anything. This specific government has a long history since the 1990s of depriving people of private property. One cannot look at this Act in isolation. Look at the safeguards, which, of course, they are there, and it's better with them there than not there.
So
but it's not.
You've mentioned safeguards. Do you not trust that they will be upheld?
No. I mean, it comes down to these are formalities. And again, it's better that they are there than they aren't. Okay. But unfortunately, most South Africans, and that includes relatively wealthy South Africans, do not have the money when they've now parted with their property. There goes the minister with their farm or their warehouse. And now they have to pay a lawyer, they have to go to court, and they have to spend sometimes a decade in court fighting the expropriation to get their market-based compensation or any compensation whatsoever. No one can really afford it except the creme de la creme of the 1%, and very few people fit in that bracket.
Okay. Let me speak to Komotso here, who is also a farmer. And when you hear, first of all, the conversation that's going on so far, what's your reaction? How do you feel about it?
I am a farmer. I've been doing that for 5 years commercially, and I operate on leased land for 5 years. So my challenge is, if I've been farming for 5 years commercially with a very good track record, how come I do not have access to land when my neighbor has got 1,000 hectares of land that is just sitting there? So for me, we need to...
Sorry, let's just go back a little bit, because we don't all understand how acquisition of property works in this country. What are the steps?
So for example, I would go and look for a farm that I'm interested in, and to my shock, everything is overly priced. And in my opinion, it's overly priced because the normal guy like me is not supposed to be able to afford to buy that piece of land. So my next logical thing to do was to lease. I've been leasing a land for 5 years. I still can't get finance for land because I need to put up security. I don't have security. My neighbor owns 100 or 1,000 hectares of land, and I'm operating on a leased 3.5 hectare farm. 5 years commercially and successful at that matter. So for me, this whole process makes it easy for people like me to be able to get the foot at the door, because what then happens is it tips the scales. So the play field is not leveled. Mm-hmm. So for me, this is a process that it might not fix everything, but it will get me into the playing field.
Yeah. Wow, Makoni, I want to hear your perspective a little bit because you are also of the opinion that this is not at all about land reform. So if it's not, what will be?
No, I absolutely agree with Bulelo and Martin that this is not about land reform. I think that is the issue with the land reform system as it currently stands, is it's deeply cynical about providing black people with land. The government doesn't trust black people with land in this country. And that's evidenced by the millions of title deeds that are held in backlogs by the state. In fact, in November of 2024, the Minister of Human Settlements said that between the years 2029 and 2024, they had the target of clearing 1 million title deeds away from the state, finally into the hands of South Africans. How many of those have been achieved today? Only 100,000, less than 10%. That is what I'm speaking about when I say there's a cynical distrust of giving black people access to land.
Okay.
There is a point of contention.
Just before we continue, let me see by show of hands, do you agree with what Makoni is saying? Do you believe, if you believe that the government trusts black people with land, raise your hand. Not a single person.
Look. Now, you saw what happened when they were asked if the government trusted the black South Africans with land. Not a single person raised their hands. Not even those who are clamoring for the black South Africans to be given more farmlands were able to raise their hands. Now, what we should all be asking ourselves is, why is it that black South Africans are not trusted with farmlands? Why? Could it be because they will just leave the land lying around wasted? Or because they might even sell off the land to someone else in exchange for cash? Or because most of them are not even genuinely interested in farming? Or is it because they heavily lack the knowledge and the training required to run a successful farmland? What could be the problem? What could be the reason that they are not trusted with land? I have a feeling they are going to tell us sooner than later. So let's keep watching.
There is that whole notion of, if I'm going to give you land, are you actually going to use it? I come from an area in Brits. He spoke about Brits. That's my hometown. There was a huge land claim that was done. Yes, land was given to people, but the land is not being used. Why? There's problems like there's no resources. So that you are not given, you can be given 10 hectares of land, but with no resources to use that land, with no help to actually get training to actually go and actually make that land productive, it's actually useless. My dad is one of the people that actually got that land that was claimed. Because he didn't have the resources to use the land, he actually resorted to leasing the land to another person who happens to be a white farmer. You're not going to believe this. A whole 15 hectares for 6,000 rand every 6 months.
So the land was restituted back to your father. He was unable to make it productive, and so he had to rent it out to a white farmer who had the resources. Yes. Wow, okay. So let me speak to Tavi again, because as a farmer, I mean, before we even started, you were telling me how you had to deal with your cattle, and these are just farmer problems that I'm familiar with, right? So is it fair for people to characterize you as the wealthy white farmer who gets access to loans? Is that true, first of all?
No, that's not true, first of all. So the main thing I think a lot of people don't realize is if you have a farm, the land after the bank hold your title. 2/3 of that farm is already owned by the bank. And if I have 1 year where harvesting isn't good, like last year, I have to go again, now it's 100%. I don't own nothing. I'm just leasing that land from the bank. And a lot of white farmers that people think are rich are actually not that rich. I know of guys that have the biggest farms, thousands of hectares, and you think, wow, these guys are rich. But they have 200 million worth of debt. And the property is also about 200 million. So that guy is actually dirt poor. So I think people really need to realize that. And Gomotso, I want to tell you, well done. That's really difficult to stay on that farm and to continuing. I can just imagine that. But I just want to add something to you. I understand you have the big neighbor with 1,000 hectares. And in my area, I'm not a big farmer as well. I have the same problem, I have to tell you. Whenever I go out and I try to lease a land, one day I dream of buying another piece. The big guys around me is going to check. I have no chance. I have no chance to buy or lease because they are bigger, they have more money than me. They can do this exact same thing, that with me than with you, even though I might have a little bigger portion than you right now.
Okay. So let me just ask you a point blank question. Do you think that the land rights in this country are equitable across the board? So if you were to wake up tomorrow as a black man, would you be comfortable with the way the laws are?
You can't trust the ANC government whenever they tell you, I promise you, we will not come and take your land one day.
Okay.
They have proven beyond a shadow of doubt over the years they can't be trusted.
All right. Let me come back to Una here, because he's referring to the ANC government, which you are not a part of. You're part of the MK Youth League. But the challenges he's describing are similar to what Homotso is describing. So is it a governance issue or is it a land issue?
Well, it's both a government issue and a systematic issue. Like Homotso mentioned, that there are monopolies out there. It's not easy to enter into the markets. You might be given the land and you don't have resources, one. Or if you are lucky to have resources to plow and do all those activities, you won't be able to get the market out there because there are monopolies which are gatekeeping the market for certain people. And even sometimes when a black estate agent comes wanting to sell somebody's land and that person you find is a white person, they don't trust the black person. They don't give them the opportunity to sell their land until a white man arrives, and then they start giving them what they call this permission to actually advertise and sell their property. Okay. So racism is something that we must not sugarcoat. We must agree that racism continues to exist in the property sector as a large, whether as a whole.
Now, he doesn't say these black people are being excluded from participation, okay? He says that the black people are not trusted. Okay, the whites are better trusted when it comes to buying and selling of these landed properties. But instead of discussing why these black South Africans are not trusted as opposed to their white counterparts, they blame racism as the problem. I mean, the other lady mentioned that her father had thousands of hectares of land, but he had to lease it to a white farmer because he couldn't manage it. He couldn't manage it because he didn't have the resources, he didn't have the manpower or the know-how, proving that the black South Africans, even though they are given these lands, they lacked the skills and the discipline to effectively manage these lands, leading to these people being distrusted, okay? Leading to the distrust of these black South Africans, even by their own government. Now, how can you blame white South Africans for your illiteracy in farming, for your lack of skills, for your lack of resources and manpower? How is that supposed to be their fault? I was actually given 1,000 hectares of land by the government, but I didn't have the resources and the skills to manage it. Now, how is that supposed to be the white farmer's fault? Instead of going for agricultural trainings and acquiring the needed skills and asking for loans from your government or from your bank, and if your bank refuses the loans, you take it out with your government or with your bank. Instead of taking these reasonable steps, you choose to blame it on white people, on racism. Okay.
Racism continues to exist in the property sector as a large, whether as a whole, whether it's in farming, whether it's in estate agent, whether it's in mining, everywhere. Racism continues to exist because what happened is that when we were given this freedom in 1994, we thought that we have achieved victory, but actually it was a strategic defeat because what happened is that they just gave us a parliament that we are able to sit there and go to the same toilet with the white person, but in actual reality, in terms of the system and how the operations of the economy run, they made sure that they will actually keep us until and we will continue to work for them until we die. A black person is born working for a white person until they die.
All right, but Kukuletu here is not working for a white person, you're working for yourself. So as a young, born free... As a young, born free who's trying to empower yourself in this sector.
It is actually funny that he claims that a black person is born working for a white person until he dies, simply because white farmers are doing well for themselves in South Africa. These people are just so fixated on white people for some reason I don't understand, okay? Have you heard about the Indians of South Africa? When you are talking about the wealthiest people in South Africa, the creme de la creme of South Africa, you have the Indians and other Asians. The black people are still at the bottom, okay? You have the whites as the most successful in South Africa. Then you have the Indians, okay? And then you have the Asians, other Asians. And then you have the coloreds, okay? Which are the biracials. Pure blacks, real blacks, sub-Saharan blacks are still at the bottom of the spectrum. But bear in mind that these blacks own 90% of the land, okay? They have the most population. 80% or 85 or so. They are the majority in government. They are ruling the land. The president is black, but yet they are at the bottom when it comes to success. Okay? They are working for the Indians. They are working for the Coloureds, and they are working for other Asians. But somehow they are only after the white South Africans.
All right, I want to hear from some people at the back. Any opinions on what we've been discussing so far?
This expropriation of land act, it's correct partially, but it does not speak to us, black people who are marginalized. Because all the inequalities that we face now, they come from us not owning the land. So it's correct that there must be expropriation of land without compensation. And the land must be given back to the black majority of this country. Tevi, yes, mentioned that there is crime. Every time when he speaks, he deviates with the crime. And he forgets that the crime, it comes from people not owning anything. Because if all of us were equal, there was no one that was going to bother entering someone's room and want to steal a cabbage. For instance, we can all be equal and we own our own land, then we farm. We can be able to defeat crime.
Oh, just give us people's farm. Give all of us people's farms. Even though we might not have the experience on how to manage it, just give it to us and we would not commit crimes. You know, these are just pathetic excuses for committing crimes. I always use my country as an example, okay? In Nigeria, everyone has their lands and we don't have any white inhabitants, okay? If we have white people, they're just maybe visitors that are going to live in, you know, a few months or something like that. We have black people, Nigerians, having lands. But that does not stop the crime in any way. It doesn't. So this is just a very, poor excuse. Give us lands and we will not, steal your crops or steal your things or kill you to collect your land. It just doesn't make sense.
Because I think we've addressed the challenges really well, I'd like to hear some solutions, right? Because I think we can all agree that there's a serious land distribution problem in this country. How do we have access to the land? How do we make it productive and still feel like we're privately owning it? Some solutions, please. Anyone? Yeah.
I think you should put it maybe a little bit differently. Ask the question, in 1980, there was 127,000 white farmers in South Africa that was farming the land. Today, there's 27,500 left, and that number is falling. They say within the next number of years, it's going to be 20,000. Now, the reason of that wasn't because of the government or expropriation or anything. It was because of the farming industry being so difficult. It is extremely difficult. I have to tell you, a lot of farmers are just going bankrupt. And then it's really good farmers. So for those that are still here, they're exceptional farmers. But the question is, why are they going bankrupt? And if a white commercial farmer that has a history, that has all the knowledge, goes bankrupt, what chance do a young black farmer that has just received land have to make it a success? So we need to ask, for the very same reason that white farmers go bankrupt, young black farmers or black farmers don't succeed. It's the same thing. It's for the same reason. So you need to ask yourself, why is that?
All right. Some solutions, please.
Yes. I think the solution is to firstly make sure that the government start making more programs available for black people, if I would say, but mainly, especially the youth, and this problem must not start when someone complete their degrees and then they don't know.
Actually, tell us by example, because you're doing that. You're training young black people here and empowering them.
Yes, so I think there must be a progression process in that, so that people don't go and join farms because there's a stipend involved. People must go to the farms to join the farm because they see themselves as future farmers. But it mustn't end there. The government must help us and make more awareness programs that entice the youth to say, when I'm done through my, could it be an internship or whatever, what is the next step for me? I think that is very blurry. And it starts from the crash, primary school, where there is a respect for land and a respect for the Constitution in terms of the right to food. Yeah. There's no way everyone can have access to food when some people eat and others are not eating. There's no way crime will go down. However, when South Africans start working together, where we have South African producers, You know, we must just stop this black and white thing, because at the end of the day, we really need to eat, all of us. If corruption can be reduced and resources be given to those that qualify and those that are very committed and have it within, because being a farmer, there's also a bit of a calling. Let us entice agriculture amongst the youth, and to make sure that the future, because the youth is the future farmers of the country, the future producers of our country, they start now, not when we are all gone, you know.
So guys, I'm happy you people have heard from the horse's mouth, okay? There are different opinions regarding this current land expropriation without compensation. I have never seen a government that takes land from the citizens without any compensation. That is very foreign and strange to me, okay? I have already talked too much. Sorry for being a talkative. Now, I would allow you to come to your own conclusion. Feel free to drop your comments in the comment section below. And if you've not subscribed to the channel, honestly, I don't know what you're waiting for. Subscribe to the channel. Like and share this video to keep people informed, and consider joining my membership or buy me a coffee if you like, as a way of supporting the channel. Thank you for watching this video, and I hope to catch you on the next one. For now, peace.